What's up, superhero fans? The as-yet-untitled fourth Avengers movie, which we'll refer to as Avengers 4 for now, will be released next year, and there's no doubt it'll result in the deaths of some prominent MCU heroes. Some of the more likely candidates include the original MCU Avengers, like Iron Man, Captain America, and indeed Thor. In this video, we'll look into the theory that Thor will die in Avengers 4, and that it will complete the prophecy of Ragnarok that we were first introduced to in last year's Thor Ragnarok movie. By Odin's beard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It's the best way of keeping up to date with all of ScreenRant's great new videos. And you shall feel the wrath of the mighty Thor if you don't. In 2017, the third Thor movie, the fantastic and hilarious cosmic adventure Thor Ragnarok, culminated in the catastrophic event happening before our very eyes. To clarify, Ragnarok in Norse mythology is a cyclical event that results in both the destruction of Asgard and the deaths of several key figures in the Norse pantheon, including but not limited to Odin, Frigga, Loki, Heimdall, and of course, Thor. Just like in the mythological version of the event, it was Surtur who destroyed Asgard in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, although it was Thor who instigated that happening in the MCU's case, in order to ensure his evil half-sister Hela was killed, rather than the gigantic fire demon doing it entirely of his own accord. Of course, Odin and Freya were already dead by the time Surtur destroyed the MCU version of Asgard, while Loki and Heimdall died in this year's Avengers Infinity War at the hands of the Mad Titan Thanos. But Thor is still alive, so could it be that Thor's death is required to complete the real Ragnarok in the MCU? That's what this theory suggests, and it suggests it might happen in next year's fourth Avengers movie. A very noteworthy point was made in Thor Ragnarok by both Odin and Thor, and it was that Asgard is not a place, but a people. Therefore, given that Ragnarok is a prophesied event, both in the classic Norse mythology and in the MCU, the fact that Thor isn't dead yet would suggest the prophecy hasn't actually been completed in our favorite live-action superhero franchise. So what could that mean going forward? Well, Ragnarok is kind of an analogy of winter bringing an end to life and subsequently the new life that arrives in the spring, because the Norse gods are all meant to die and then be reborn in new bodies. That obviously can't happen with one of the most prominent, important, and powerful Norse gods still living. Countless Asgardian characters, both prominent ones and some not so prominent ones, have perished in the MCU to date. But Thor was indeed left alive when Thanos and his children boarded the Statesman and massacred his people en masse in the opening scenes of Avengers Infinity War. And it's even been questioned whether or not Loki is really dead, but that's a discussion for another video, as it would severely complicate things in this one. Several other Asgardians, including most notably Tessa Thompson's Valkyrie, have been confirmed as being still alive, but whether or not their deaths are required for the completion of Ragnarok is open to debate. Regardless, in that incredibly dark scene at the start of Infinity War, Thanos said, "Dread it, run from it. Destiny arrives all the same," which could turn out to be very poignant, as it suggests Thor's death and potentially the deaths of any surviving Asgardians are inevitable, and will result in the culmination of Ragnarok in Avengers 4, fulfilling the ancient prophecy as well as Thor's destiny in one devastating fell swoop. As far as Ragnarok is concerned in the MCU, it's been hinted at since back in 2015 in Avengers Age of Ultron, when a still badly behaving Wanda Maximoff induced strange and deeply effective visions on the Avengers. Thor's visions saw Heimdall informing him that he'd be the one who destroyed Asgard, followed by Chris Hemsworth's character blasting Asgardians with powerful lightning bolts left, right, and center, resulting in their deaths. While the vision did come to pass to some extent in Thor Ragnarok, Thor certainly didn't kill any Asgardians himself, even if he was the one to trigger the destruction of his home realm, as he made sure he'd evacuated Asgard first. That being said, it could certainly be argued that what Thor did in Thor Ragnarok inadvertently led to the remaining Asgardians' eventual demise at the hands of Thanos. Forcing them all onto one ship was actually a naive move. It made them vulnerable, all grouped together and distinctly lacking in protection, especially given that the ship in question wasn't even a warship, and the majority of the Asgardians on board were civilians with families rather than soldiers. Thor's actions in his Scarlet Witch-induced vision could therefore be seen as a metaphor, but it's a tedious link at best, given that Thanos would undoubtedly have headed to Asgard to obtain the Tesseract if Surtur hadn't destroyed destroyed it. His actions towards the Asgardians would therefore have been equally as ruthless, even if they'd been on home soil. But the vision could also have been a literal depiction of what Ragnarok entails in the MCU. As we already touched upon, Thor was killing Asgardians with his lightning in the vision. And given that Asgard is said to be a people rather than a place in the franchise, maybe he and any other surviving Asgardians do need to perish for the prophecy to be truly fulfilled. There is therefore a theory that suggests Avengers 4 will venture back to Asgard in some way, shape, or form. We know the realm was destroyed in Thor Ragnarok, but the fact that some scenes for Avengers 4 were filmed at Durham Cathedral in the United Kingdom would indeed suggest Asgard will appear in the movie. The cathedral is a decidedly classic setting, and there aren't many of those in the MCU, other than Asgard. Granted, it could be a time travel scene or a flashback in which Asgard appears, but the cathedral could also very easily be dressed up to look like the ruins of Asgard, and Avengers 4 could just as easily venture back to those ruins as opposed to Asgard as it used to be. The fact that a stand-in for Rocket was seen on set at Durham Cathedral would suggest that the God of Thunder and his rabbit friend will head to Asgard. But then again, if we're being honest, it could actually just be that the scene was filmed for Avengers Infinity War and just didn't end up being included in the final cut. Only time will tell as far as that's concerned. If Thor does end up dying and Ragnarok comes to a completion as a result of his death in Avengers 4, it wouldn't even necessarily mean it's the last we'd see of the character in the MCU. As we said earlier, Ragnarok is a cyclical event from which the Norse gods always return, reborn to live again. And Thor's rebirth could also see the other deceased Asgardians returning to the franchise, which is a pretty exciting thought. Obviously, on the flip side of all of this, there's not only a chance that the Ragnarok story could be done and dusted in the MCU, there's also a chance it could actually be undone. Some of the set photos from Avengers 4 have shown Thor as having long hair again, which certainly suggests it's a version of the character from the past. And that could mean Ragnarok never happens in the MCU, and Asgard remains intact going forward. And weirdly enough, that actually fits with the classic motif of the Norse apocalypse, as it's just as much about rebirth and second chances as it is about death and destruction. So now we have to ponder whether or not Thor will die, and indeed whether or not it makes sense for that to be the case in Avengers 4. Of course, if Marvel Studios wants to follow the mythological version of Ragnarok to the letter, then it's only right that the God of Thunder will be in line for the chopping block in Avengers 4. Moreover, given the events of Avengers Infinity War, it makes sense that Thor would sacrifice his own life to finally finish Thanos once and for all. The Asgardian Avenger was undeniably completely responsible for missing the opportunity to land a killing blow on the Mad Titan when he had the chance to do so, instead opting to inflict a chest wound so he could taunt the prune-chinned despot and let him know he had defeated him. Essentially, he let his ego get the better of him, even in the face of a cosmic catastrophe, which doesn't really reflect well on his character. Ultimately, this meant Thanos was still able to snap those fingers and erase half of all life in the universe, and subsequently use the power of the Infinity Stones to heal from the damage inflicted by Thor. The resulting guilt will undoubtedly prey very heavily on Thor's conscience going into the fourth Avengers movie. So it's only logical and indeed very fitting for a Hollywood blockbuster that he would give his own life as recompense. If indeed that happens, would signify a true end to Asgard as we know it. Of course, Thor may well defeat Thanos without the loss of his own life, but it would definitely be very poetic if he sacrificed himself to save the universe, after spectacularly failing to do so the first time around. And it would give Marvel Studios the license to bring him back if they wish to, as they could set him up on a whole new series of adventures for Phase 4 of the franchise, in a truly post-Ragnarok world. With Iron Man and Captain America likely to exit the MCU after Avengers 4, Thor could be the last remaining member of the original trinity of the franchise. And that's fine, because Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans both seem intent on leaving to pursue new projects. Moreover, their departures would undoubtedly leave a hole that only a fellow original Avenger could fill. And given how incredibly powerful Thor is, the remaining heroes in the franchise could undoubtedly do with him sticking around for a little bit longer. Thor could very easily continue to be one of the MCU's mainstays, or even go on to become the franchise's flagship character, especially given that he's been completely reinvigorated by both Thor Ragnarok and Avengers Infinity War. He's become a lot cooler and funnier than he was to begin with when Kenneth Branagh directed his first movie and made his dialogue very Shakespearean and Lord of the Rings-esque. Chris Hemsworth has really surprised everyone with how brilliantly he's taken to playing the comedic interpretation of Thor under director Taika Waititi's leadership. And his new role undoubtedly has the potential to lead to some truly wacky and hilarious cosmic adventures going forward, perhaps alongside at least a couple of the members of the Guardians of the Galaxy, such as Rocket and Groot. The Australian star has explicitly stated that he'd be more than willing to continue playing Thor if the right scripts come along. He obviously really enjoys acting in the role, and now that Marvel Studios has really nailed that character and given him an identity, it would actually be a real shame to get rid of him when he's on such a high. In summary, should Thor die and Ragnarok does finally come to pass in Avengers 4, assuming the MCU's version of the event isn't already done and dusted, it would be very easy to bring him back. Rebirth is as much a part of Ragnarok as death, so Marvel would get the best of both worlds. Thor would die a fitting and valiant death, with Thanos being defeated, and the God of Thunder could still return in the future, in another solo movie with a simple explanation of, well, that's Ragnarok. And if comedy genius Taika Waititi just so happens to be at the helm of that movie, that would make it all the more awesome and exciting. Of course, thinking about it, Thor would actually come back in a new body, so would it even be Hemsworth playing the character if he was reborn? Who else could play that role? Maybe we'll discuss that topic another time. What do you think of this theory? Will Thor die in Avengers 4? And will it result in the completion of Ragnarok in the MCU? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to ScreenRant for more great videos just like this one. Farewell, Midgardians!